Okay, today on the show, we have Lawrence Dunning from Mainstreet Real Estate Group. Lawrence was born in the UK in London. He graduated with an MBA in finance, eventually settling in Chicago. At age 24, he set up his own trading company, which he ran for the next 7 years. At age 30, he decided to step away from business to pursue some athletic goals. Actually, spent 5 years doing just that. In particular, he has done MMA fights. He's done 10 professional MMA fights, has his black belt in jiu-jitsu, a number of other accomplishments physically as well. And then he's become convinced during that time about the real estate investing model. And he bought his first investment property, which was a commercial strip mall, and got his broker's license 5 years ago and has been a top 1% producer for the last 3 years, which is an incredible feat to do that quickly. And he's used the same principles that to build both a successful trading company and now a successful real estate broker business. So we're excited to have him on the show. This is a real treat for us. Welcome to the show, Lawrence.
Awesome. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I would love to learn about how you made the switch from being a trader and having that company, into real estate. Why the switch? Obviously, Chicago is a huge trading market, as you know.
Yes.
But why the switch? I know a ton of traders that have done that, so I'm really curious to know how you got involved.
Well, so trading was just it's such a lucrative business. And like you said, the Chicago market is just sort of one of the epicenters of, I was an option trader. So one of the top, option trading centers in the world. And so I was trading, and I got to credit my mentor and good friend Mo, who owns my company. He and I met over a decade ago, and we both had dogs, and we were both on kind of a late schedule. So we'd be out walking our dogs, and we'd just be talking. And so Mo would always be talking about, oh, there's so much money in flips and things like that. And this is a decade plus ago, a long time ago. But we never really got going on the flips. But then uh, I stepped away from trading. I was, in the pit trading for a while. But when I stepped away and I was kind of focusing on some personal goals, I would still trade a bit online, and I was still, trying to make money. And then it's so interesting because you assume, or at least I did when I was young, if you're doing something and you're good at it, you're going to be able to make money by doing that for the foreseeable future. But I didn't, high frequency trading came, and there's very, very few people that I knew back in the pit that are still trading. It's such a tough business now.
So the algorithms took over, and
exactly. Yeah. So I was kind of finding that, but I was still kind of struggling, trying to make a bit of money. And then Mo who was a broker at the time, was like, what about, we started talking about just investing in real estate. So the first thing I did in real estate wise, aside from buying my condo when I first moved here, was I bought this commercial property. And then as an owner and a landlord, I really started to learn about the business model. And I think what I really want to kind of explain to people is, I thought I knew about money and finance. So I come from have an MBA, like you said.
And you do know about money and finance, right? Like
right,
that's the trading, the trader's background.
But exactly. But what's so crazy is I think there was a huge blind spot I had. And I really think, because when I look back, I think, man, I'm not a lot of people have, a good degree, and then they start work and they don't really, they're not really that curious about learning or anything. But I've been obsessively reading and learning since I was a kid. So I think, man, not only do I have an MBA, so I have the degree, which I think in practical purposes is kind of worthless personally. But I also read, dozens and dozens of books on finance and entrepreneurship and reading about these, these really high achievers. And I think through all of that knowledge, the real estate model, it barely was mentioned. So I only kind of found out about that from a practical perspective, and largely thanks to Mo, like I said. And then the more I learned and the more I tried, like even if you said to me, hey, what's a great book to read for real estate investing? I could give you one or two that are okay, but they're still not great. There's not really something out there, because it's just, the problem is it's so specific.
Right.
If I was going to write, I do want to write a little ebook on real estate investing in Chicago, but I'm not going to pretend to know about other cities, and I'm not even going to think about other countries. And even in Chicago, you're so specific, this street, this type of building, that type of building, everything is so different. I think that's why people just don't talk about it. They have this, when you study finance, there's this cookie cutter thing. They say, okay, if you're young, you want to put 70% of your money in stocks,
Right.
25 in bonds, and 5% cash. And then as you get older, you're just switching the ratios.
Right.
That no one talks about investing in real estate because they don't really know how, most of these programs are very uniform. So you've got the same MBA program in Shanghai, in London, in New York, in Sydney. And you can teach the same principles with stocks. Anyone can open up an E-Trade account and trade the same things. But it's with real estate, you really need somebody on the ground who's just a master at a certain area. And even he doesn't know much more about anything else but just his area he's focused on. So I think it's just so interesting that kind of coming to this realization, the long way around, I guess. So,
yeah. Go
oh,
ahead. No, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, so once I started, so it was all kind of happening at the same time. So I bought this property. I saw I was making good money, income from the property, and then trading was getting tougher and tougher. And then I was at a crossroads where I was just thinking, there's no point. Letting go of trading was very, very hard for me to do because, I made in a day what I made in my first year of real estate. Where else can you make that crazy money? But the problem is, if you can make it that easily, you can also lose it that easily. So by letting that was a very tough mentally bridge to overcome. But I was so convinced with the real estate model, and that I kind of had an idea that trading wasn't going to come back. It was just going to get harder and harder to make money, that I decided if I was going to be a real estate investor, I should get my license and I should just learn more. I should be on the ground and I should really learn the city. And so that's basically what I've done the last 6 years. Is I've just been trying to I do what pretty much what every broker does, successful broker, but I've also kind of focused a lot of my business on the investing side because that's more of my passion. And it's not that I went into this trying to find a niche. The niche almost found me.
So I just had a huge coughing attack. So we had to pause for a moment. So apologize for how disjointed this probably seems, but I think that's really important. And I bet you also, as now a broker, are probably also really, and it seems to be because and I know that you're not just an investor, you're a traditional broker, you work with buyers and sellers, renters, but also investors, and you yourself are also an investor. And I'm always shocked at how many realtors do not service the investment market and also aren't investors themselves. And I imagine that blows your mind as well. And I know that's a huge passion of yours, is making sure that people understand residual income and why real estate investing can work.
Exactly.
Yeah, and why it's, the uber richer, of course, as you have explained to me, uber richer are doing that. But it's amazing how many brokers themselves really aren't that skilled at knowing about investments.
Right. And I think that's a problem with, I see this with a lot of new agents, is they're kind of scared to do everything. And I think the principles of real estate apply to everything. So I get questions sometimes, oh, do you do commercial real estate? Do you do this? Do you do that? I do everything. I'll help a friend get a rental. I'll help, multi-million dollar investment property for, commercial property, regular 2 to 4 unit property, a condo. It's all the same. The principles underlying real estate is all the same. So I think people need to stop being worried about a commercial property, residential. Of course, there's a few subtleties, but the principles are the same. But I think there's some statistic, I don't know the exact, is it 45,000 licensed agents in Illinois, and there's some huge amount of them that don't even own the home they live in. And then, the ones that obviously own the home they live in, a lot of them don't have investment properties. So it's definitely easier for me to deal with investors because I can explain, this building is like the building I bought last year, and the reason I bought it is because of XYZ. That's why it will be a good investment. So I definitely have that going for me. It's a bit easier for me to explain. But again, this stuff is not it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward with investing once you know the formulas, to analyze these ratios, the cash on cash return, the cap rates, and things like that.
Yeah, it is always remarkable to me that brokers will even become top producers in traditional buyers and seller environment. And then the moment an investor comes to them, they're really not able to service that. And that's okay if they actively choose not to service the investor market, because it is a different clientele.
Yeah,
It's just a different process altogether. But I
right.
suspect a lot of times it's just because they haven't put the time in to really understand what an investor's needs are, how that process works, and it takes years to
Yes.
get that knowledge. But it's also something that you can start today, and then a
Yes.
year or two from now, wow, the ability to be able to provide those services are so important, because otherwise you're going to be turning away business. And again, if you choose to turn it away because you don't have time, that's great. But I think it's a lot of times just lack of knowledge.
Right. And I think that's a great point because the the market, especially in Chicago, we've basically had a decade plus run of very stable and slow and steady growth. With the stock market's done great the last 10 years, minus the last 2 weeks. But the the agents today are spoiled, right? A lot of them haven't lived through the last recession. They haven't seen. So when business is good, I guess you don't have to take all the business. You can kind of pick and choose. But we are in something. I mean, there was a great graph that I put on my LinkedIn a few days ago. We've had 5 decades of interest rates coming down. So I think the foreseeable future we're gonna stay in this low interest rate environment. And the big thing with that is, if you have money, in my opinion, you only have two options, because bonds just doesn't pay you anything.
Right.
Precious metals aren't really going anywhere. Cash, you're eroding inflation every day. So the only options are stocks and real estate. And the thing with the stock market is, at some point, even before the last few weeks, I was saying, listen, I don't know when it's going to happen, but at some
Right.
point, you don't have these 10 plus years of
Yeah.
unbroken runs. So I think that it is important, if you're dealing with people with money, to educate them on the real estate investment model, because that for me is the only good alternative to stocks. And I think it's way, like, I barely have any stocks. I have a few lingering in one of my trading accounts. But in the thing with the stock market, the big difference I think with the stock market and the real estate market is, and it's very hard to even talk about this with you, because like we said at the beginning of the show, am I talking about the stock market, the luxury condo market in Manhattan? Am I talking about multi-units in Chicago? Or am I talking about single family homes in, LA suburbs? It's all different, right? So when I throw out these statistics, they obviously are averages in general. They're very generalizations. But I think there's something like a quarter of the volatility in the real estate market that there is in the stock market. And I mean, you've seen that
Yeah.
with this last few weeks. It's kind of shown some of the frothiness and the volatility of when there's fears. I don't have, I don't have an $800,000 condo suddenly selling for 600 in the last 2 weeks. It's not the same. So
Right.
I think your volatility with the right building is less. But also I think that the big thing that people just, with stocks, I guess you have two things, right? You have the appreciation and you have dividends. But we've been in an environment where the dividends is relatively low for most stocks.
Right.
The big thing with when I talk about the right type of real estate, your cash on cash return should be close to, if not double figures, double digits a year, it should be close to that. So maybe it's 8%, maybe it's 10%. But
Well,
oh,
Well,
go
that's
ahead.
the thing too. And I mean, look, last year, my index funds were up 30% because
Right.
the market was up. And that's a great year. However, I would trade the volatility of that for a 7 to 9% return
Right.
year after year, because I know, and I've always felt this way about money, that the best way that I can grow my income is by working. And then I just
Right.
want a more traditional, a traditional return that's not necessarily guaranteed, but that has a lower volatility, because that is something I can't control. So
Right.
I would trade the 30% returns for like a 10% averaged return over time, in a less volatile environment, which would be real estate investing, if
Right.
done correctly.
Exactly. But that's a great point. So you highlighted the volatility. Most, especially when you're young, you don't mind the volatility. I'm 40 now. I don't really want crazy volatility, but that's only one half. So to use your example, if you made 30% last year on your stock portfolio, you had a great year, and you only made 10% on your real estate, the big difference between the real estate is you're buying it typically as an investor with 25% down. And
Right.
if real estate is averaging even through the biggest 2008 to 2010, that was the biggest real estate correction we've had in a century. Even through that, you're averaging about 5% return a year through real estate. Now, because you're only buying with a quarter down, that 5% is actually 20% on real money. So
Right.
then that's when you start making big money. You have the 10% cash on cash return. You have the 20% because of the leverage in a very 4 to 5% appreciation period. And then on top of both of those, every month you're paying down your debt. So your equity is increasing. And then on top of all of that, you have all these tax benefits. So when you put that all together, a slow and steady market that's increasing 4 to 5% a year, your cash on cash return of the right property is closer to 33%. Then you're doubling your money every 3 years. So that's kind of why, in a nutshell, real estate is the secret of the ultra rich.
And I really would love to point out that these are conversations you have with your traditional clients as well. Your traditional
Right.
primary residence buyers and sellers. You have this knowledge, you have this passion for it, and it works for you personally. And I just
Right.
think how much more powerful and important does that make you to your clients versus just, yeah, I can help you buy or sell this home.
Right.
Obviously, we have 40 some thousand realtors, and
Right.
actually the total number of realtors in Chicago, including the suburbs, is over 40,000 in and of itself. So it's like there's
Crazy.
plenty of people that can help you buy or sell a home, and obviously
Right.
many of them, some of them do that much better than others. But I love
Right.
the always the idea that you're also able to say, hey, by the way, you should really and I would love to get your perspective on this. A lot of people think their primary residence is an investment. My thought is maybe it might be, you
Mm.
might get lucky, and when you sell it, it might be worth more, but it's not really an investment because it doesn't really produce income for you. I've
Right.
always thought investments should produce, some sort of regular income. But this is where real estate investing comes in. But
No,
I would love,
100%.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, talking about your primary resident being an investment, I bought my first condo in 2004. So I got my first bonus from my trading company, put down 20%. I bought my condo. Fast forward 16 years, it's probably appreciated. I paid 300,000. I think it's probably worth about 340. So I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking absolutely negligible appreciation in nearly 2 decades. So, but I knew that going in because I was living in. I wanted to. My company put me up in Streeterville. They put me up in a rental. I got my first bonus. I moved 1 block, so I like the area.
Yeah.
So I knew when I bought it, then even though I didn't know anything about real estate, I knew that at the time was the highest price per square foot in the city. And
Right.
buying a 1 bedroom condo, it's like how much upside are you going to get? So,
Right.
but I think so, and that's kind of what I try and explain to people. For your primary residence, of course, it shouldn't be a bad investment, but you
Right.
shouldn't really look to make any money off it. That shouldn't the way I see it, and I would tell someone is, listen, you want to live where you want to live. Now, if you're a young person and you say, listen, I can deal with living somewhere I don't want to live, to buy a multi-unit with an FHA loan where I just put down a little bit as an investment, and then after 1 year I can move out. That's a little different story, but I didn't really want to go that route. And I guess at the time in my early 20s, I didn't even know that was an option. So I think that people, you can kind of, you can take advantage of what is given to you. So right now we're in a very, interest for FHA loans, you're paying about 3%. So it's
Right.
insanely cheap. And you can put down, say, if you can find a 4 unit building and the FHA limit is 709, I think it is, and you have to put down 3.5%, you could, in theory, have the seller sell it to you for 735, give you 26,000 cash back, use that as your down payment. You're almost buying it for nothing. The problem is finding those is like finding a unicorn in this
Right.
environment because they haven't raised the FHA rates for a decade plus. So the problem you're going to have is, of course, I can find anyone a building like that, but it's not going to have good numbers because it's not going to be recently rehabbed in a good area with good rents and good numbers. I do find them occasionally, but they're very, very, very hard to come by.
Yeah, I would love to switch gears because we talked about this very briefly in your intro, and you are a very physical person. You've competed, in MMA fights. Can you talk a little bit about the discipline that goes
Yeah.
into, you stepped away entirely from business to pursue these goals. Can you talk a little bit about that? I just find that so
No,
fascinating.
yeah, for sure. So what happened was, um, I think I always knew at a young age that like I came from an English system. I grew up in England. I went to school in England. Coming here, I realized just how good the US sports systems are in, high school and college. In England, unless you're a really, really good soccer player, they have really good programs for you, maybe a little bit of rugby. The rest
Sure.
of the programs are kind of nonsense. So I played soccer growing up. When I was a kid, I wasn't good enough to be the elite level. One of my good friends played professionally, which was awesome. But I always dabbled in things, but I never really had an outlet. So when I came here, I was trading and it was very intense. And a lot of the people, when you have a job like that with so much intensity, you need some kind of release. So a lot of them went down the path of drinking and drugs, and that was their release.
Sure.
And I started boxing. So I went into this boxing gym, and there was a lot of famous UFC fighters in there, and it was kind of one of the best jiu-jitsu and boxing gyms in the city at the time. Now there's a lot more. Back then there was only really one. And so I remember I walked in and my future boxing coach said to me, "Oh, you got the jaw of a fighter. You should box in the Golden Gloves." And then I was like, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool." So I started when I was trading. My life was literally just work in the trading pit, take a nap in the office for a couple of hours because it was a very early start, then go straight to the boxing gym, come home and go to sleep and just rinse and repeat all day. So I did that. I won the Golden Gloves. I had a few disappointments.
Wow.
I fought for the Illinois state title, which I lost, and I had a great boxing career. But I got to the stage where I was like, okay, I'm in my late 20s. I'd been doing jiu-jitsu a little bit. MMA was becoming really popular, and I realized I have my whole life to make money, but we have these windows of opportunity that come and go. And I realized I remember I turned 30, and I had one thing I kind of backtrack on for advice for new agents is if you want to start creating wealth, it's not just about investing, but it's also, you have to be saving money too. And the reason I became very wealthy in my 20s is because, like I said, I bought my condo in my first bonus. I didn't have a car. I didn't have all these crazy expenses. I took a few nice trips. That was my treat, but I wasn't lavishly spending money. I knew people that renting these nice cars and going to the clubs with their Lamborghini and getting tables. And I wasn't into any of that. So as I was making money in my 20s, my net worth just kept going up, going up, going up. And then I got to the stage where I was lying in bed one night, I couldn't sleep, and I got up and I was like, man, how much am I actually worth? And I started to look at my trading accounts and my trading seats and all the assets I had. And I was like, wow, I'm actually worth quite a lot of money. I'm going to step away. I'd kind of lost a bit of the passion for trading. And I already seen the signs. It was becoming harder to make money. And I thought, wow, I'm 30 years old as a male athlete. You don't have too long. You probably have, 5 years. You're seeing people go a little later now. But, for me, I was like, I probably got 5 years. And I thought, this is the chance if I want to actually do something. And for my big thing that I always live my life by is there's a great Les Brown quote. And he talks about, do you want to be that person at your dying bedside with the angels of your potential all around you, saying like, we came to you, you had all these talents and potential,
Yeah.
and you wasted us. And it's
Right.
one of my favorite speeches. It gives me goosebumps when I hear it. And I've always been driven by that fear. I've been driven by a fear of being this old man
Yeah.
with, grandkids at my feet, and maybe I have a nice house and I have money, but I have these regrets. Why didn't I do this when I was 25? Why didn't I do this when I was 30? So I've always been driven by the fear of regrets and having to seize opportunity. So that's why I was like, you know what, I've just got to jump in and do this. So it was such a great period of my life, and it was so hard because a lot of people, I think, you look at what it takes to succeed in athletics. I don't think I had any natural abilities other than grit and determination. And I think that it was a really great period of my life. It was incredibly hard. Physically, I just think I had this thing in my head. I was like, well, okay, I go to work, I trade all day, I take a nap, I go to the gym. It's like, if I don't have to get up at 5:30 a.m. and go to the trading floor, I'll be able to sleep in, I'll be able to train 2-3 times a day. In between the training sessions, I'm going to be learning Spanish, learning Portuguese, doing all these cool things. I didn't realize that when you're training 2-3 times a day, you are so zonked. You are just trying to nap or like just, I don't know, space out for a few hours between sessions. It's so exhausting, but it was such a great period because I remember right at the end, I had fighting is such a funny thing. It's exciting because there's so many variables. And I remember I never felt like I was performing to my abilities, and it was always very frustrating. And I had one fight, it was my penultimate fight, and I felt like actually everything came together and I showed my potential and I was very happy. And then I was like, I have one more. And then I was like, okay, now it's time to, close this chapter, but I don't have crazy injuries and brain trauma, it's time to close it. But the one mistake that I made is during those 5 years is I assumed that when it was done, I could do something in trading and keep making, a lot of money. I didn't
Right.
realize that that door of the, while I took the door of the doing something athletic while I still had the time and youth and energy, the door on the finance, on the trading, that completely closed. So that was all kind of happening at the same time. Well, I bought my building during that time, and that was kind of what made the decision. Well, okay, I'm in my mid-30s. What the hell am I going to do now? Because I I was I probably made every mistake in the book. I was way over leveraged in stocks through the last stock correction, and the one good thing I guess I did is buy that property. But I assumed I'm very confident, and I know that I always assume that no matter what I do, I'm going to make money, right? I had that in the
Right.
back of my head. You have to have that confidence. So instead of what I should have done during those 5 years is say, listen, like, you're dabbling a bit in trading. You're not really making that much money, but I'd got used to a certain, and I'm going to kind of contradict myself. I wasn't big on buying cars and doing all this stuff, but I did have a certain expensive lifestyle while I taking lavish vacations and things like that. So when you don't work for 5 years or you don't make too much money, you're spending a reasonable amount every year. Your net worth's taking a hit. And then right at the end, I started trading a little bit more online. So I was like, I kind of want to make some good money. And I was trading grain options, and I was having a good year. And I was like, you know what? I had a big position on. I was like, I'm having a good year, but I kind of want to have a great year. I want to make more than I've spent the last 5 years, and I want to crush it. And I put a big position on, and I thought I was right. And I lost every day for 2 weeks straight. So 10
Oh,
trading days. It went against me, went against me, went against me. And I finally got to the stage where I woke up and I said, I'm gonna lose everything if I keep this position, even though I think I'm right. They call it in trading, they say the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. And that's exactly what happened. If I woke up and I said, if it turns against me today, I'm going to get out of everything. The first 5 minutes of trading, it went against me. I got out of everything, and then 10 minutes later, it reversed, and I would have made, $1 million. So
oh,
that was that was a very frustrating and painful experience. And and since then, I'm like, you know what? I just kind of what we were talking about. I don't want that volatility in my life. I want to have. I'm not impressed by if someone says, "Hey, I've got this idea, Lawrence. You can make 100,000." That doesn't impress me as much as someone that says, "Hey, you can do something. It's going to make you $1,000 a month for the rest of your life." So
right.
that's when I realized that that's why for me at that age and with my personality, I, I realized that the real estate model is 100% something I want to work on. So all these things we're talking about, they're all kind of linked. But I really think the lessons from that story to anyone listening is you have to take opportunities. So for instance, what I try and tell my one of my partners that I work with a lot, John, is business is good right now. We've had, like we said, 10 years of low interest rates, stable. The economy's creeping up. Everything's nice and stable. People are doing things. People feel wealthy because of the pensions, and everything's up. So I said, you've got to be absolutely crushing it and hustling now, because when times are bad, it's going to be 4 times as hard to make the business. So I think with that story, a couple of things that I guess lessons that I learned that hopefully people won't make the same mistakes as me is it doesn't matter how good your one revenue stream is. One revenue stream is not enough, because life can always get in the way and change. You can be making $500,000 a year from one revenue stream. you I think the statistic is the average multimillionaire has 7 different streams of income, and I think that you should definitely add a few more streams to that one revenue stream. And the other thing is you just have to take opportunity when you have it. If me as an investor, as a buyer, if there's no inventory that I like with the wrong returns, I'm just going to sit and wait. Maybe I have to wait 6 months or 5 years. I don't care. I'm not just going to force it. On the same token, right now, interest rates are so low. If banks would give me these loans, I would take $10 million of debt today and I would invest, because it's for me, it's free money. So I think
Right.
that's the one lesson I took from that, I guess. Take opportunities when you have it.
Make hay while the sun shines, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the discipline that it's take, that you have demonstrated throughout your entire career, right? You started a company very young, you had your
Yes.
MBA, so you had the knowledge, but obviously with MMA and other types of physical activity, boxing, discipline is everything,
Right.
along with business as well. Can you talk
Mm.
about what it takes to be successful as a realtor,
Yes.
discipline wise?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to manage expectations. So I remember when I first I had some friends, and Mo was one of them, but some friends talking about Gary Vee, and I found him a little bit annoying. I didn't really know too much about him, but
Well,
the way
well,
he
he
came
is a
on,
little bit annoying, but
well,
he's also
but
very smart and he
well,
knows what he's talking about.
but I recently, a few months ago, I think I put on my Instagram, I put a podcast with him and Rich Roll, who's an ultramarathon runner, and
Yeah.
I listen to it now a bit older than when I first heard him, and a bit more mature, I guess, and it resonated so much with me because everything he was just saying, everybody complains, and I guess we live in an era where you can you pull up, you do a hashtag of
Everyone's
something
got a
you're into.
voice. Yeah.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
also I feel like everybody's out there pushing the best self and their image. And
Sure.
and what
Yeah.
he said is, he said, listen, not everybody can build $1 million company, only a few percent, because it
Yeah.
takes a lot of work. And he said, all my big pet peeve is someone that isn't happy with their situation. They want a certain amount of income or a certain amount of lifestyle, but they don't want to do the work that it takes to get there.
Right.
And I think that one of my rules that I live with, and I think it was from Tony Robbins or somebody like that, but he said we always overestimate what we can do in 1 year and we
Right.
underestimate what we can do in a decade. And I think that's any success I have, I would say it's the same thing. I didn't win the Golden Gloves my first year. It took me 3 years and 3 attempts to win. I wasn't a top agent in my first year. It took me my third year in real estate. And I think that's something, it applies to sport, it applies to business, it applies to almost anything, even relationships. I got married a year and a half ago. I think I'm a better husband now than I was, when we were dating, because I've learned to be a better partner, to communicate better, all these little things that would go into a positive relationship. So I think that if our audience is mainly in real estate, I would say you have to be a long-term thinker. You have to have a horizon where I get these new agents, and there was one that just joined our company, a really really nice young kid, very enthusiastic. He could be wonderful, but he's there telling Mo when he's doing his training, he's like, "Hey, I want to be like Lawrence." And it's like, well, Lawrence didn't just start his first year in real estate and was selling $1 million investment properties. It took time to. So I would say you have to play the long game in business for sure for success. And then talking about the discipline, I think it's habits and consistency. So you have to you always have to have the goal and the dream, right? People are very big on, in I want to sell $10 million in 12 months, and then they say, okay, I break that down, so that's a little under $1 million a month. But that's the dream. In order to get there, you're going to
Right.
be just every single day you're doing the right things, the right habits, the right consistency. And I think the best advice that I would give, I think, is relationships. Because it, not just with your, like, it's when I deal with on the other side of a transaction with a professional broker, it's such a pleasure. We're both on top of it. It's just a seamless, smooth transaction. And when you deal with people that don't really know what they're doing, and it's like pulling teeth. And I think it's the same with people. Like, if I'm buying a house, do I want to work with a broker who's a pleasure to be around? He's knowledgeable, he's responsive, he's on top of it, or do I want to be with a guy who I'm chasing him so he can get my commission? So I think, this is such small, easy things. And I'm a big believer in work hard, play hard. So I'm not trying to say don't have a life, but you have to have certain systems in place. So, for instance, I was with my wife. I had surgery on my elbow a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't do much. So I took a 10-day vacation to the Maldives with my wife, and I'm sitting there, and one of my good friends is doing a sell by, and he's selling his building, and he was texting me, and he's like, Lawrence, how are you more responsive than the selling attorney who's skiing in Vail? He's like, you're in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I had terrible service. I'm on some crappy hotel Wi-Fi, and it says it was a good reminder that you don't want to. You definitely need to take breaks from technology, breaks from your phone, breaks from work, but also you have to have certain habits. So whether it's first thing in the morning and then you have a couple of different times, 2 p.m., 5 p.m., and then evening before sleep, or whatever it is, you have to just stay consistent. Whether it's checking in with people, replying to emails, doing your searches, even just education. I think that's a huge thing. I think consistency in education. I know that before I was in real estate, I was a huge reader. And the first couple of years in real estate, I was so busy running around the city, trying to learn the business. I would take horrendous leads because I just wanted to learn the business. I wanted to be out there learning. And I was actually dating a girl at the time who had been in real estate for a long time. She was very lazy and she had all these just crappy rental leads. And she's like, I don't want this. I said, I'll take it all. I took hundreds and hundreds of rental leads. I drove all around the city because I wanted to know the city well. I wanted to know the business well. I wanted to be around people. I wanted to be busy. I wanted to be engaged. And during that time, I didn't read. There was a few years where I really didn't read much. I didn't learn much on that side of things. I was just so focused on the practical aspect of being a new broker, and I think my happiness went down hugely. So I think that always putting time to improve yourself, to learn. For me personally, it makes me a happier person, but it also makes you just a much more knowledgeable person to be around. And too many people focus on what you're going to get. So I laugh. I get on LinkedIn, I probably get 3 or 4 messages a week, almost one a day now. And it's somebody like, hey, I really want you to give me business to do this. When can we meet for a coffee? Or when can we have a 50-minute
Oh,
phone?
I
And
get
it's like,
those coffee messages every
yeah,
day. It drives
it's,
me. I'm like, I don't know
well,
you.
yeah, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that what's so funny about that is, what are they doing? They're focusing on what they can get from me. They're offering no
Right.
value. So most of the time, I don't even have time to respond. Whereas if I had say it was a lender and he sent me a message and he said, hey, I have a guy who wants to buy a multi-unit. I think he's a pre-qualified client. He's great. Can you help him? And he buys an $800,000 investment property. How much business am I going to give that guy back? I'm going to give him 10
You would
times the
be,
business back.
yeah, you'd be forever indebted to
Exactly.
to
And
that lender.
exactly. And he would get so much business from me. So I think that's the same with everything. It's like when I'm with a client, I've had relationships where I've worked with some builders where maybe it was 12 months, 18 months. I didn't make a single dollar. I did quite a lot for them. But when it comes around, I'm going to be their broker for the foreseeable future. And I think again, coming back to that, playing the long game is you have to develop the relationships that are going to make you the money later on, and you've got to focus on what you're giving as opposed to, hey, what buildings can I sell for you? Well, do you know what you're doing? Oh, not really. Like I think that's something we see a lot in our business, but also I think it's 2020. That's the culture, right? It's like I want to get up here, but I'm only down here, and I don't want to do all the steps. I just want to jump to the top. So I think trying to rush the process, it doesn't help you either.
Yeah, it's always about discipline. So even like your example, I think, which is a good one, which a lot of times realtors get into the business, they're new, they say, okay, 10 million a year in my, let's say my second year, my first year, whatever, seems
Yes.
reasonable. If you break it down to $1 million a month, that's a couple of 2 to 3 clients a month. That seems like
Mm.
reasonable. The problem is, then the question is, okay, that's not really the goal. That's the result. So like
Yeah,
the goal is,
exactly.
okay, how many people do I need to meet today so that in 3 months I might have one client, right? And maybe I need to meet 5 people every single day or whatever that number is. And if you just drill down to like 1 or 2 metrics that you can do on a daily basis, pretty much everything else should take care of itself. But
Yeah.
it's realizing every day, wake up. Look, I'm sure the same thing with the different sports that you've been involved in.
Mm.
It's a certain amount of practice that you just have to do, and then hopefully come game time or match time, you can just go into autopilot. But it's all the push-ups, it's all of the boring
It,
daily activities that win the game, right?
exactly. I think that's so great. You picked up on that. There's a really great analogy that I read recently, and it says if you're taken off from LA and you point the nose of the 747 6 degrees to the right, by the time you land on the East Coast, that's going to make the difference between landing in New York or in Washington. And I love
Right.
that. And what he's saying is, here's the thing: I'm a pretty healthy person. Maybe I'm trying to train for a marathon in 6 weeks, which I actually am.
Wow.
I can skip my run today because I can run tomorrow. That one run isn't going to make any difference. But if you do that every day, I'm not going to be able to run. And I think that's such an important point you just said is, though same thing if you're trying to lose weight and you go out and you have absolute you pig out, you get drunk and have a big night. That's not going to make you. You're going to wake up the next day. You could probably going to look pretty much the same if you take off your shirt and look in the mirror. But if you keep doing those actions, that's the key. So I think the way to summarize it is, if you're doing the right actions, time becomes your ally. As you move towards your goal, time is helping you get there. And if you do the wrong actions, time is going to become your enemy. And I think that's such a, you picked up on that 100%. That applies to almost everything in life, right? It's like that the one action today is not going to make or break you, but it's that done repeatedly that's going to be the difference between a winner and a loser.
And by the way, it really does apply to everything. And this idea of checking in or measuring on a daily basis is so important. And it doesn't mean you have to be super anal and judge yourself every day, but you do need, even like relationships are a more abstract example. If I,
Yes.
and this is not the most romantic thing that anyone would want to hear, but the truth is, if I don't sit and think, how am I doing in my relationship? When's the last time I told my girlfriend how beautiful she is? When's the last
Yes.
time I did something really nice for her? And again, I would love it if those things just came to me every single day naturally and I never had to think about it. But the truth is, just like anything else, I have to remind myself. I have to have daily activities so that you're right. Will my girlfriend notice if 3 straight days I don't mention how beautiful she is? Probably not. Who knows? Maybe she would. But I know that it's important and I want to do those things for her. But I better be checking in with myself and know, hey, it's time for me to say something really nice. And again, then maybe that's not the best example, but it
No.
sort of is, because you have to
Actually,
be.
no, I
Good.
think no, I think that is the perfect example because what uh, like it's exactly the same. Being a good boyfriend or husband one day to the next is not going to make or break a relationship, but over time it 100% will. And I think I'm sure there's a book something like The Power of Small Changes or something that talks about this. I read a long time ago, and I think it's so true. It's like what you do today does matter, and it's compounded every day. And I think, but in order, back to the discipline thing, I think that motivation comes and goes, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
why you have to, like, I'm really big on, I love listening to Les Brown's my favorite, but I love, like, I'll sometimes put on one of those 30-minute motivational, with music and some different motivational speakers talking, and I'll go for a run, and it's like a slow recovery run at the end of the day, and I'm just letting my mind kind of clear, and you're basically filling up your brain with just positivity, motivation, inspiration, all these things. That's great, but the problem is you all have days where you wake up, your body's sore, you don't want to go to the gym. You wake up, you got a headache, you don't want to talk to 10 clients. So what gets you through those days is just having your big picture goal and just making it. I wouldn't even say it's discipline. I would say it's a conscious choice you make. This is my lifestyle. And I think they talk about that, where you have to have the, so if you want to be a top agent, for example, to bring it back to real estate, you have the image of yourself as a top agent. Well, how does a top agent act? Well, he looks good when he goes to showings. He conducts himself in a professional way. He's responsive. He gets back to people. He's knowledgeable. He knows what he's doing. So if you have that image of you as that person, you're going to do all the things you need to do it. Likewise, if you're an athlete and you see yourself as a champion, what does a champion do? Well, he gets his sleep. He gets his massages. He eats well. He goes to the gym when he does. Of course, there's going to be days where if you're sick or injured, you're going to have to take a break. But aside from that, you don't even think about it. If I wake up tomorrow, I teach jiu-jitsu on Wednesdays. If I wake up tomorrow and my back's sore and I've got a headache, I'm not even thinking about not going to jiu-jitsu. It's going to happen. You don't even give yourself a choice. And I think that's a really
Right.
key point, is if something is important enough to you, so you actually really want it, you have to make it an unconscious choice. Otherwise, we all have that little voice inside us, like, oh, you're tired. Why don't you skip today? And I remember talking to an old friend years ago, and he said to me, "Oh, it's all right for you. You're lucky. It's easy for you to do these things." And I was like, "What?
Oh,
Easy for
oh
me?
no,
You
I'm sure
crazy?"
it's not easy for you at
Of,
all.
of
It's not easy
course,
for anybody. Yeah.
exactly. And I was so happy. I remember back when I was boxing, when I was in my 20s, and every morning that I knew I had a boxing match in the evening, every single time, I would say, why am I doing this? Like, I'm not getting paid for this. I got a good career. Like, why am I putting myself in this position every single time? And I remember years later, I was watching, like, I think it was George St. Pierre, the UFC champion at my weight, welterweight. And he was joking. He said he was going to the arena for his fight. And he said, man, I wish there was some kind of crazy electrical power outage. The whole stadium was shut down and they canceled the fight. And I thought, wow, so it's not just me. Every single champion, every single person has to overcome this. You don't want to do these hard things. It's ingrained in our DNA, right? We have something. We all are here today because our ancestors survived, and there's something in survival where it's that natural thing where if you don't have to do it, why are you doing it? So we have to overcome this innate laziness, and I think that it's the habits, the discipline, all that stuff. That's it. But it's not the David Goggins has become very famous recently. He's really big on, motivational on Instagram and everything. And one thing I really like about him is he says there is no finish line. And I think that's so true. I have a friend of mine, I was complaining about something. I think just before my elbow surgery, I'm complaining to one of my good friends, Brad, who does jiu-jitsu with me, and he's an investor and a good friend of mine. And I was like, oh, it sucks. I'm getting old, getting these surgeries. I'm 41 in a few weeks. And he says to me, he said, yeah, but you're fine. Like, you can sit in your office and I've got some framed pictures and some medals and trophies and, memorabilia from 2 decades in those sports. And he's like, you've achieved so much. It must be so awesome. And I'm thinking, but once once you've achieved it, I want to keep going. I don't want to sit on my laurels and rest. And that's actually something I'm very passionate about, is just happiness, positive psychology. And because ultimately, why do you want to be a top agent to a new agent? He thinks if he sells $10 million a year, he makes 250,000 commission. That's going to give him a lifestyle for him to be happy.
I will finally be happy when I
Yes.
achieve X. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's so almost all the decisions we make in life, we think we're doing them, to give us happiness. So I think for me, you have to be, no high achiever is ever going to be where they want to be in life.